Hallo, ich habe euch etwas mitgebracht, ein neues Video. Greetings, my name is Nina. Welcome back to the Metal Book Tavern. In this video, I'm going to talk about books that I have been reading lately and also the books that I read around August and September. Before I begin, I really want to point out that recently I started a sort of a reading journal. I went to the shops and I found one reading journal, but it was way too expensive. And then I also looked up and there were no other journals. And then I saw other booktubers making reading journals, well, in their bullet journals, and I thought I'd find one, but I didn't. On the other hand, I have had this little sketchbook for around 2 years. Originally, I bought it to gift it to someone, but eventually I decided to keep it, and I decided to use it as a reading journal. Well, I made my own outlines. I can say that I am in the process of making this sketchbook into a reading journal. Oh, and I also have this ruler because I use the ruler to make it. And so far, I only wrote about 2 books. All right, let's go to the books that I read recently. Here are the books that I read from the end of August up to October. So I'd like to start with King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table of Roger Lancelin Green. I'll try to describe these books briefly. What this book is about? It's about King Arthur, of course. So this is actually an upcoming of Arthur as the ruler of Britain. And in this book, for this book, Roger Lancelin Green, he took various interpretations of King Arthur's tales, including the Thomas Mallory's The Death of Arthur. I can't pronounce the original title, De Morte d'Arthur or something, sorry. So this book is told in 4 parts. While the book does start with Arthur. Arthur is the main focus. In the middle of the book focuses on the Knights of the Round Table. Well, the title is justified because it's called King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. So there's each chapter dedicated to each of the knights. Prior to reading this, I had a short book about King Arthur, and spoiler alert, I was completely horrified by Merlin's fate. I was horrified about what happened to him. In that book, I don't remember who was the author, it was very short, Merlin was tricked. But here, Merlin sensed his fate and he obeyed it. Spoiler alert, what happens to him in both versions, although in different circumstances. In one version, it was treachery, and here it was obedience to fate. What happens is that Lady Nimue enchants Merlin, puts him to sleep, and buries him somewhere. So, spoiler alert, once Merlin meets his fate in this book, he doesn't make appearance, even though it's said that he's actually alive and he's going to come back. This book being for children and having bright adventures, this book is very tragic. Well, because spoiler alert, by the end, King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, they dissolve because things happen, they die, or they turn into enemies. Roger Lancelin Green wrote a tragedy for children. Speaking of the author, he knew personally J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, and he encouraged Lewis to publish Narnia. Well, Tolkien didn't like Narnia, and Roger Lancelin Green did. Also, in this book, we have the story of Tristan. Also, the story has Sir Gawain and the Green Knight chapter, and once I came across the chapter, I remembered that J.R.R. Tolkien does have a book about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Actually saw it at the store in Batumi, but I didn't buy it. And now I kinda regret because I nearly ran out of my Tolkien stuff to read. And I'd either have to reread Tolkien stuff or wait until I find more. I rate this book 4 stars, very well written, for adults to be interested in, but also it is very tragic and also very exciting. Move on. I finally finished The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Prior to buying this book, I watched a review by the book Leo, and she said that Ursula K. Le Guin had an idea and it should have been an essay or something like that. It should have been non-fiction. Ursula K. Le Guin, she takes two opposing viewpoints to life and everything, turns them into two separate planets. In this book we have a scientist from Anares, the anarchistic planet called Shevek, who feels unappreciated on his birth planet, and he goes to Uras, the planet where there's private property and order and hierarchy and things like that, and he goes there. He hopes to publish his findings and he hopes that he's going to be appreciated there, but things don't go well. One problem I do have with dystopias, well, we can call this dystopian sci-fi. One problem I have with dystopias is that they focus on the setting and the rules of the setting way too much instead of plotting characters. Sure, this is great to write speculative fiction, but also you need a proper story, and I do think that this story could have been much more exciting. The cover of this book says to be read again and again by the Times. Am I going to read this again? I think yes, but I'm going to need a lot of time before I go back to this book. I rated this book 3 stars because interesting ideas. The execution could have been better. Yeah, finally I finished these 2 Tolkien books. Yeah, I finally finished Return of the King. Around October-November 2021, I bought the entire trilogy, and I thought I was going to read this in a few months. It means that I would read this from November up to January, February, or maximum to March. Spoiler alert, it took 2 years to read this. What can I say about this book? Fun fact about this book, I began reading it on January 1st, 2023. And around September, I finished it. You know what? When I was reading the book, I did remember some parts of the film. It is definitely important to read the books and not just stick to the films, because there are details and context and tones that are different from the films. This is especially noticeable at the Frodo and Sam storyline. It was a long journey for me. I needed months to read this. It is true that you need to be in a certain mood to go through Tolkien, and apparently I wasn't in the mood until autumn. Autumn is definitely the best time to read Tolkien. I am always advocating for reading Tolkien in English. However, while I was reading this book, I realized that I would read anything by Tolkien in English but Lord of the Rings. Yeah, it's true that it's hard to get through Lord of the Rings because of descriptions of everything and everyone and so on. And also there were a lot of changes from this book to the film. For example, there were some parts from the second book that they didn't adapt in the second film and they made it to the third film. For example, the climbing on the ladders. And also when Sam finds Frodo and Frodo sees the ring that Sam is carrying it, Frodo goes insane just like Bilbo in the film. And I can definitely say that this madness was kept in the Rankin Bass animated film. Well, yeah, once Frodo sees that Sam has the ring, he's like, give it to me right now. Well, this was a very long journey and there's a lot of words to be said about it, but I'm running out of time, so off to the next book. And this is going to be 4 to 5 stars. Well, speaking of Tolkien, I also read The Fall of Arthur. It's a very short poem that Tolkien did not finish. He abandoned this poem once he began writing The Hobbit. And most of the book is mostly a commentary by Christopher Tolkien. But there's one scene that is also in this book too. One scene is present in both. It's Lancelot saving Guinevere. Guinevere. I don't know the right pronunciation. Oh, and also I like that in his name he has the name Lancelin in the middle, and Lancelin does sound like Lancelot. Most of the book is Christopher Tolkien's commentary, and he talks about the evolution of the poem and also its connection to the Silmarillion, particularly the Arendelle storyline. I hope I pronounced that right. It's kinda hard to pronounce Tolkien's names. at least in English. Well, I rated this 4 stars. Probably could have rated higher if had it been finished, but... And finally, I read The Antichrist by Friedrich Nietzsche. This edition also has Esse Homo, and I read it too. Esse Homo consists of short essays like why I am so wise, why I'm so clever, why I write such good books, etc. This is considered Friedrich Nietzsche's most scandalous work. Okay, this book is way too controversial to talk about, so I'm sorry, I'd rather talk about other books. I rated it 4 stars, very interesting read, a lot of interesting thoughts, and you should read this and make your own mind about this book. I definitely can tell you that while reading Friedrich Nietzsche, you should not be afraid of books that you might disagree with. I understood that while reading Zarathustra. Okay, these were the books that I read, and now to the books that I am currently reading. Finally, the joke that I made on this channel is finally over. I am finally about to finish Unfinished Tale of Numenor and the Middle Earth. I can definitely tell you that this book shows the events of Lord of the Rings from a different perspective. We have the perspectives of Gandalf and Saruman, during the events of the Fellowship of the Ring at the very beginning. It is definitely said that how Saruman envied Gandalf and tried to copy him literally, and he showed interest in the Shire only because Gandalf himself was interested in the Shire. Also, we have the story of Aldarion and Erendis. Aldarion is a heir to Numenor, who is mostly interested in sailing, and Erendis is also of royalty. He keeps promising to her that he will marry her, but time goes on and he keeps on sailing. And while I was reading, I kept thinking, I hate Aldarion, I hate him. He keeps wasting Erendis' time. But then eventually they do marry, and the marriage is kinda unhappy. I can definitely say that I did not expect this from Tolkien. Tolkien, who wrote Beren and Luthien, he also came up with Aragorn and Arwen. You'd think he'd come up with some magical type of marriage and love and so on, but no. Aldarion and Erendis, he definitely showed what some would call realistic. Yeah, and they also have a daughter, and the girl grows up mostly without her father. It was kind of painful to read this. I'm also slowly reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, although I'm reading it very slowly. It isn't a fast read. Okay, technically it's quite a fast read, but I want to read it slowly to dive deep into this book. These Penguin Classics edition have lots of introductions, forewords, and so on. It's kinda a little bit tiring. Prefaces. How many books are here? Oh, wait a second. Here are 12 books, and I am on the book 4. I need to continue from the book 4. So I'm filming this video on October 23rd, and last night I kept reading This Changes Everything by Naomi Klein, and I knew from the very beginning that the topic of this book is definitely not for me. It's not my thing. Yes, I read this, but for some reason I don't understand too much. Sure, I understood the key moments for the human factor, how people should help out each other, and how nature is important. Well, her previous book, No Is Not Enough, I understood very well. It was very interesting to read, despite it being one-sided, but this one... Let's move on. Another book that I read last night, finally, it's Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, Part 3. A is A. Finally. I read 100 pages. Originally, while I was reading, I really wanted to quit the book overall, but still I decided to finish this. Well, I wanted to quit because I did not remember much from the first 2 parts, but something kept me going. You know what I dislike about this book is that Ayn Rand keeps making some philosophical arguments through the words of her characters. The characters, some of them, are functions to her. They function to make points, and the points that are valid to her. I disagree with this book in many ways. I do find it very grey, and in part 3, Dagny Taggart, spoilers, finally meets John Gold, and once I saw them together, my initial thought was, when are they going to be together? Well, the main character Dagny, I like her, but I also am surprised that nearly every male character is in love with her. Yeah, a little bit Mary Sue-ish to me. Dagny is kinda magnificent, so it's kinda justified. It's not like she's actual Mary Sue, no. Alright, move on. Also, I'm reading this secret book. Recently I began reading it, but I'm not going to reveal it because this is a spoiler to my future book haul. So there are also 2 other books that I'm currently reading. I kept them here because I didn't want to ruin the look. Finally, I'm reading Wheel of Time, Shadow Rising, 4th book by Robert Jordan. Yeah, lots of events happen. I'm on page 567. Yeah, it's definitely half of the book. So in this book, we all have the return to the 2 rivers. And yeah, it's kinda sad. The main characters who were together in the 4th book are separated again, because of prophecy, fate, learning, or whatever. And it makes for a lot of interesting storylines. And the last book for today is Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I finally began reading this book. So finally, this book starts with spoilers, exams. So at the end of last book, there was a twist. It was that Bast coerced the Chronicle to work for him and make Quoth remember mostly the positive aspects of his story. And so far, Quoth continues telling his story in mostly neutral ways. Sure, a lot of positive stuff and a lot of some negative stuff too. I wonder how it's going to affect Quoth's story overall, the best requests. Alright, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. What are you currently reading? Let me know down in the comments. See you next time. Goodbye.